A British couple, both high school sophomores, decided to visit Seaside Lake Park, on the northern edge of Mount Baoma. But they mysteriously disappeared. Just one day later, their bodies were discovered. The autopsy results sent chills down everyone's spine. Both had been brutally attacked, with injuries covering their bodies. It was clear the female victim had been assaulted, her face severely disfigured, and her left eye completely lost. What made the case even more perplexing was that 6 months later, the police had no solid leads. That is, until the CEO of the company where the male victim's father worked stepped in and raised the reward from $50,000 to $550,000. Only then did the case begin to crack open. Why did this young couple meet such a violent fate? Who could be capable of something so horrific? Let's dive deeper into this unsettling mystery. Step into T.C channel, where every brain-bending mystery unfolds, one clue at a time. Don't just watch, subscribe now and challenge yourself to crack the case. On the morning of April 21, 1985, Hong Kong police received a call. A man jogging near Mount Baoma had discovered the body of a foreign man. At around 6 a.m., he noticed a young man in blue jeans, lying on the wet grass. The grass was still damp with morning dew, which seemed odd to the caller. Who would lie down in such wet grass? Curious, he approached cautiously. When he got about 50 meters away, he realized something was wrong. The young man wasn't just resting, his hands were tied behind his back, and he was face down on the ground. The caller shouted, but there was no response. He felt uneasy, but bravely approached, and that's when he realized the man was already dead. He quickly left the scene and called the police. Once the police arrived at Baoma Mountain, with the help of the caller, they located the body. When they turned it over, they found that the victim was a young man with blonde hair. His shirt was almost completely torn apart. Looking at his face, it was clear that he had suffered extreme trauma, so severe that it was hard to recognize him. Only his eyes and mouth remained visible. His eyes were half open, and his mouth was slightly ajar. There was blood on his head, which had already started to dry. What stood out even more were the numerous bruises and marks on his body, especially on his chest and back. It was evident that he had suffered blunt force trauma. The police's initial assessment suggested that the killer had used a hard object to strike him, causing serious injuries, before tying his hands with bandages and continuing the attack. The scene showed signs of chaos, leading the police to believe that at least 3 people were involved. After bringing the body back for identification, the police struggled to figure out who the victim was, given the severity of the face injuries. But then, a call came in from the principal of Hong Kong Ingtong School, who reported that 2 11th grade students were missing. One was 17-year-old Kenneth, and the other was 18-year-old Nicola Meyers. The police quickly linked Nicola to the case. As they dug deeper, more clues surfaced, giving the investigation its first real breakthrough. Kenneth and Nicola, 2 high school sophomores, were a couple. They had left school together the afternoon before, but now, Kenneth's body was found on Baoma Mountain. What happened to Nicola? This led the police to make a bold guess. They suspected Nicola might have been a victim too. To confirm this, they launched another search on Baoma Mountain. Sure enough, not far from where Kenneth was found, they discovered Nicola's body. When they found her, her upper body was exposed in a shocking way, with her beige t-shirt pulled over her head, completely covering her face. What they uncovered next was far more unsettling. Her face was severely damaged, her jaw appeared broken, and one of her eyes was missing. The police took her body back for an autopsy, and the coroner's report showed something chilling. Nicola had suffered severe trauma before her death. Her body had multiple deep wounds, and even fragments of wood and glass were found in her injuries. But that wasn't all. The police soon realized the 2 wetland areas on Baoma Mountain weren't even the original crime scene. Determined to find the real crime scene, the police mobilized 600 officers and called in a helicopter. On the 3rd day, they made a significant breakthrough. An officer found several items in a small grove, clothing and jewelry. It turned out they belonged to Nicola. But that wasn't all they discovered. There were several broken wooden sticks nearby, some with hair on them, and a discarded glass bottle with traces of something suspicious. Despite obtaining DNA and fingerprint evidence from a potential suspect, the technology at the time couldn't confirm the suspect's identity. Even worse, the police compared the fingerprints to previous offenders in Hong Kong, but there was no match. Frustrated, the police shifted focus to investigating the victims' family backgrounds, hoping to uncover a potential motive. But what they found was surprising. Both families were relatively new to Hong Kong, with small social circles. There were no obvious enemies, no apparent reasons for this brutal violence. Kenneth and Nicola were popular with their peers, and there were no signs of any conflict or bad blood with anyone. The police quickly ruled out revenge as a motive, shifting their focus to other leads, hoping to uncover new clues that could crack the case. To gather more information, the police set up a tip hotline and cordoned off the central tower, conducting interviews with locals in search of new leads. But after 6 months of investigation, the case hit a dead end with no major breakthroughs. In the meantime, the families of the victims were left to sorrowfully send their children's remains back to the UK for burial. The media from both Hong Kong and the UK kept the pressure on the police, demanding progress. Faced with this pressure, the Hong Kong police stepped up their efforts, offering a $50,000 reward to encourage tips. Moved by the family's suffering, the CEO of Kenneth's father's company stepped in, raising the reward to $550,000 out of his own pocket. Soon after, the police received an important tip. An informant overheard a gang member, Peng Sini, boasting about killing a foreigner and stealing a pair of Nike shoes from the victim. The informant knew the shoes well, as his sister worked for Nike, and confirmed the shoes were a rare model only sold in the UK at the time, not yet available in Hong Kong. Acting on this tip, the police launched an investigation into Peng Sini. After a month of surveillance, they uncovered a troubling connection. Peng Sini and his associates were strong suspects. In November 1985, the police moved quickly, arresting 3 adults, 24-year-old Peng Sini, 25-year-old Tan Shih-Huan, and 27-year-old Zhao Weimin, along with 2 minors, 17-year-old Yin Sanlong and 16-year-old Zhang Yoheng. Once in custody, police linked the suspects to the crime scene, linking them to the crime scene with evidence found on Nicola's body, fingerprints, and other clues. During questioning, the police hit a wall. None of the suspects would admit to being the mastermind or reveal the details. This was especially true for the 3 adults, Peng Sini, Tan Shih-Huan, and Zhao Weimin, who had years of criminal experience and knew how to handle police interrogations. So, the police turned their attention to the minors, Yin Sanlong and Zhang Yoheng. Zhang was evasive, but Yin Sanlong showed signs of fear and confusion. Seizing the moment, the police told him the evidence was undeniable and that he would face severe consequences, whether he confessed or not. Realizing the gravity of his situation, Yin Sanlong knew he was in deep trouble. The pressure mounted. Would he crack? Stay tuned. After some time, he finally broke down and confessed, revealing the full truth of what happened. He explained that on April 20th, under the leadership of Peng Sini, they went up Baoma Mountain with plans to steal copper cables from a government line. As they climbed, they unexpectedly came across Kenneth and Nicola, a young couple enjoying a quiet date in a secluded grove. Peng Sini commented, "Why would these students choose a quiet place like this for a date instead of going out like others?" Despite the remark, they didn't pay much attention and continued their way up the mountain. But when Peng Sini saw the gold watch Kenneth was wearing, he decided to steal it. The others agreed, although Yin Sanlong hesitated, worried that Kenneth might be too strong to overpower. But then Peng Sini noticed the bandage on Kenneth's collarbone, realizing he might be injured and more vulnerable than he appeared. With 5 of them against 1, Yin Sanlong's fears started to fade. Following Peng Sini's lead, they quickly surrounded Kenneth and Nicola in the woods. Kenneth and Nicola were clearly frightened, but tried to stay calm, offering money and valuables, asking not to be harmed. Peng Sini accepted, taking Kenneth's gold watch and Nicola's bracelet. But after a brief glance, he tossed the bracelet to the others, then grabbed Nicola's bag, taking whatever loose change was inside. The group started to leave, but Peng Sini stopped them. He then focused on Nicola with a clear intention. Nicola quickly realized his intentions and refused to follow him. Peng Sini tried to force her into the woods, and Kenneth charged at him, struggling to stop him. The other 4 continued their assault on Kenneth, focusing on his injured collarbone and restraining him. They continued until he lost consciousness. In the end, they took Kenneth's life. When the police asked about Nicola, Yin Sanlong said she couldn't have gotten far. After dealing with Kenneth, they eventually caught up to her. Following Peng Sini's orders, the others kept watch over Kenneth's lifeless body, while Peng Sini dragged Nicola into a nearby grove. Yin Sanlong later admitted that after what they did to Kenneth, their aggression grew even stronger. They then directed their anger towards Nicola. Yin Sanlong couldn't recall how many times they attacked, but he remembered that when Nicola stopped responding, they stopped. Later, Peng Sini suggested they dispose of Kenneth and Nicola's bodies nearby, and take the stolen items with them. Following unsettling statement, the police took him to the scene. At the first location he identified, they found bloodstains and part of Nicola's body. All the evidence clearly points to the criminal actions of these 5 individuals. After confirming the crime scene and bringing unsettling into custody, the police meticulously reviewed and organized the evidence, preparing for the next steps in the legal process. By 1987, some of the offenders had already been sentenced to death. However, by 1992, 3 of the adult suspects had their death sentences commuted to life imprisonment, as part of the usual procedure. As for the 2 minors, unsettling and Yongyong, their cases were postponed until they turned 18, due to the legal system's handling of juveniles at the time. In 1997, as Hong Kong's sovereignty was about to transfer to China, unsettling and Yongyong's families began to protest, demanding clarity on their sentences. But before a decision could be reached, Hong Kong was handed over to the Chinese government. By 1998, Chief Executive Tung Chee-hwa confirmed unsettling's sentence of 27 years, while Zhang Yongheng's was set to 35 years. Zhang Yongheng appealed his sentence, but in 2004, the appeal was rejected. In 2014, unsettling was granted early release, due to his good behavior in prison, and began a new chapter in his life, working at a law firm. Zhang Yongheng, after serving another 11 years, was released in 2017. While the case has been legally settled, its impact on society still lingers. This is a moment for all of us to reflect on: how can we prevent young people from turning to violent crime? And how do we support those at risk, so they don't fall down a destructive path? This isn't just a lesson of a single case, it's a wider societal issue that we all need to address. Parents, teachers, and the community at large must play their part in reducing violence and supporting vulnerable youth. Violence and crime are problems no society can afford to ignore, and it's our collective responsibility to create a safer, fairer world for future generations. If you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel, and leave your thoughts on this case in the comments below. I'm always open to your suggestions, so I can continue bringing you more thought-provoking case stories. See you in the next episode.